everyone and welcome to FPI free practice impression of the Bahrain Grand Prix. I'm Beatrice from MotorLAT and today we are going to discuss free practices and the main news in what I would call a very bureaucratic weekend since Liberty Media are presenting their 2021 blueprint. So there are ongoing discussions between team principals and the FIA concerning budget cap, engine costs and any possible measurements to make Formula One more accessible to the fan base from an understanding point of view. So we are obviously going to keep an eye on that because it's interesting and it's going to affect our next years of work. But I would also call this weekend bureaucratic due to the amount of fines and grid penalty which are hitting our drivers. The most striking one is Lewis Hamilton's 5-place grid penalty following a gearbox change, which was actually called for in Australia since the team had detected a hydraulic leak. So they had already planned on changing this part, whereas Valtteri Bottas and, for example, Kevin Magnussen are escaping the penalty because one did make the change in Australia and the other one did not finish the race. So according to the rules, he doesn't have to be penalised this weekend. Also, Kimi Raikkonen is escaping the penalty, but Ferrari is going to be fined €5,000 due to unsafe release at the end of FP2 with a loose front wheel. But obviously the Ferrari driver, who appears to be on a roll this weekend, he's keeping very firmly his place on the grid without any penalties. So Ferrari is displaying a very competitive qualifying pace as FP2 displayed. There was a Ferrari 1-2 with both drivers lapping around 1.29.8, which is getting close to last year's pole position time, which is a very promising sign, whereas Mercedes is struggling with the setup. So they are actually in difficulties on all areas, so race pace and qualifying pace. They are already 6 tenths behind in FP2, so in qualifying they're not going to be fighting for pole position unless they unleash the party mode with a vulnerable Valtteri Bottas, who is going to defend the silver arrows alone, because obviously Lewis Hamilton is not going to start anywhere near the first row, unfortunately. Whereas Ferrari is going to be very competitive also on the race pace because they are lapping around 1.35.8, but they're not the fastest actually. Red Bull, which started in a very negative way with Max Verstappen, who suffered from an early engine problem in FP1 where he had to literally push the car back into the pits. Actually, Red Bulls are very competitive. They are 1/10 faster than Ferrari on the race pace simulation, whereas Mercedes are behind there as well. They are lapping around 1.36.0 or 0.1, so they are not the fastest, which is a very worrying sign. So they have to come up with a very competitive setup in order to actually save their weekend in Bahrain. And moving on to the midfield, which is obviously going to be very tight this weekend as well, we have a very promising Nico Hülkenberg in P7 at the end of FP2, just in front of a Toro Rosso Honda, who is obviously Pierre Gasly. Both drivers of Toro Rosso actually changed the MGUH, the MGUK and the turbo. This is a very worrying signal because they obviously are at the second race and they are already using their second set of available components for the engine, and this 8th position at the end of FP2 is not reflecting their true potential because obviously the engine mapping, they are expected not to go any further, whereas for example Renault is going to up their engine mapping level for qualifying, so they are going to actually climb towards the front of the midfield, whereas obviously and inevitably Toro Rosso is going to fall towards the back. And at the end of the top 10 we have Fernando Alonso and Stoffel van Dorn, who are actually going aggressive this weekend. McLaren has brought many updates, aerodynamic updates. They are going quite aggressive from this standpoint, and also they said that the Australian Grand Prix was their worst weekend of the season, so they are obviously holding very high expectations for the remainder of the season. They are actually displaying very good and positive signals also with their engine, so they have to be competitive and ambitious. They are actually targeting the top 3. They want to actually get closer to Red Bull, but at the moment I would see them more at the midfield, fighting with Haas, although Haas did work on a different program during the FP2 as Romain Grosjean was in P11. And on the race pace, they are going to be as well in the midfield, but McLaren was undoubtedly the most competitive, and Fernando Alonso on a soft stint was just 1/10 slower than Sebastian Vettel, although the German did a complete run, whereas Fernando Alonso did lap less. So we do not have a real comparison in full effect. However, the signals from the MCL33 are very positive. We are also going to see a rather less competitive Force India as it was anticipated in Australia. Actually, they're not going to fight for the Q3 nor the top 10, but at least we will see them challenge the bottom of the top 10. Whereas Williams is really struggling. They said that their car is extreme actually, but it has a negative connotation because the drivers do not seem to get any better. They probably got the wrong end of the stick this season with the whole project. So obviously they're not going to fight for the top 10, and they're going to probably not going through the Q2. So this is going to be probably a draft of this weekend's qualifying. Let me know what your predictions are for the qualifying and for the race as well. And guys, we'll see each other very soon for the top 5 all moments on Monday. Have a great race weekend. Bye.